Hello and welcome to Shpielberg. I'm Nathan.
And I'm John.
We're your co-host, and we're here to talk about films, video games, stories, theology, and everything in between. In other words, we're here to give you the spiel. Today, co-host John here, our beautiful, beloved Shpielberg co-host, is going to be bringing us his episode. This is going to be amazing, okay? The greatest thing you've ever heard in the world. Do you understand this, viewers? Okay? So, John, take it away. What are we doing today?
Oh, man, you hyped it up way too much. Now everyone's going to be disappointed. They'll be like, today we're reviewing the Muppet movie. And everyone's like, no!
How did they guess that so quickly?
Today we are not doing the Muppet movie. We are covering our first video game here on Shpielberg. The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. Nathan and I were able to play through the entire game.
John, pray tell, how long did that take?
Probably around 13 or 14 hours.
We spent 13 hours playing through this video game, which was amazing and glorious. Now, as a viewer, I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I taste the glory of 13 hours of thing?
Well, you'll be able to see it if you support us over on Ko-fi.
Coffee? This wasn't planned at all. All right. You can support us. Thank you, John. I'll take it away from here because obviously I'm the brains behind this operation.
Well, you're the mouth.
That's for sure. There will be a massive banner right on your screen where it will give you the entire link. Links are down in the description. John, why? I mean, as the viewers well know, hopefully, if they're attentive, we don't have any ads playing before our videos. Why did we choose to do that? And why is Ko-fi our alternative? And as you suggested, what are some of the benefits that you may receive if you help us out and support us on Ko-fi?
Well, so the reason that we don't have any ads on our channel is because ads as a whole can be a bit risky when it comes to your device security. Ads have been known to contain malware, and so we kind of want to remove any chance of that happening. Additionally, we can't always control the ads that show up, and so I think for all of our sakes, we'd rather ads just not be there altogether.
Right. I don't want a Muppets trailer to play for Shpielberg.
What do you have against the Muppets? Wait, what do I have against the Muppets?
Yeah.
Wait, why are we bringing up the Muppets so much in this episode?
I don't know. And if you love Shpielberg, we would sincerely appreciate you supporting us and contributing to our goal, to our objective, which is to contextualize all media, all forms of media and story through the light of the gospel. So you can go ahead, click that link. So back to the matter at hand, this glorious 14-hour video, again, you can watch on Ko-fi. We went through the entire game. John, what is Majora's Mask? Since you're presenting this week's episode for us, what is Majora's Mask about?
Well, so backstory. The game is a sequel to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask came out in the year 2000 for the Nintendo 64. The game follows the young boy Link as he travels to the foreign land of Termina, searching for an old friend of his.
Yes, which is?
The Skull Kid. When he arrives in this land, he gets wrapped up in the turmoil caused by this friend of his who has acquired an evil mask that has given him the power to pull the moon down to cause it to crash into the town, destroying the whole land.
Very subtle moon. John, put a picture of the subtle moon on the screen. Thank you very much.
Bing. And so in order to stop it, he teams up with a small fairy and travels to the 4 lands surrounding the town in order to rescue the guardians and help them to defeat this Skull Kid and to save the town.
Yes. Now, wrapped up in this, I remember some part of the narrative that this carnival that is also approaching on parallel dates of the moon crashing, this festival is all about these 4 deities, right?
Of sorts, yeah. 4 guardians. This game is Japanese, so I'm really curious as to what the word for guardian that they used was.
the title of this Zelda game is Majora's Masks. Now, masks play a major role in this particular Zelda game. Can you go down just a little bit? What is the role of the mask or the masks throughout the Zelda game?
Before we touch on that, I think I need to touch very briefly on the role of masks in Japanese festivals.
Okay.
Because it is incredibly common to see masks being sold during certain festivals in Japan. As I understand it, I am not an expert on this. Remember, Nathan and I are two idiots here.
I take up the two of them. Okay, so you have room.
So everything that I say here should be taken with some salt. I did not grow up in Japan, nor am I a scholar. But from what I understand, the masks used in festivals both symbolize the partaking with old heroes of lore, old deities. By wearing a mask, you both become the role of the character that you take the mask of. You also, in some spiritual way, sort of join with them in partaking in their task. And so masks were used both in rituals, but also in plays. If you're familiar with plays from the No tradition, they very commonly use masks to portray certain characters, but not only characters, but emotions as well. If you recall masks, the comedy and tragedy masks from...
Yep, Greek legends. Well, not legends, but Greek theater.
And so these kind of masks, it shouldn't be too surprising to see them here. And so with that in mind, we then look at the game and we can see that the masks used in the game are used in very similar ways. The masks tend to contain the abilities of the characters that they represent, or maybe they contain their sorrow. You gain a few masks in the game that actually allow you to change your form and to transform into the characters depicted on the mask.
And so this is a very, I think for Western context, as you kind of pointed out, this is an Eastern theme. And so from my Western perspective, it is a pretty kind of fun, unique idea that I don't think we even have in the present consciousness in our culture. The Greek symbols of tragedy and comedy are not even really, I mean, they're just symbols at this point. They're just icons. I don't think I've gotten that connection between their characteristics compared with just theater in general. So it was interesting to go through, like, imagine if these masks were really, they carried some inherent mystical ability.
But that's kind of an overview of the idea. Link has to go through this game, which, by the way, even though the character is canonically named Link, they give you the option to name him whatever you want in the beginning. And so, of course, we named him Shpiel.
And you can witness this in real time on our coffee account. Plugs!
Okay, enough with the self-plugs. So Link, as he goes through this game, gathering masks to use to aid him in his quest, he also has to keep in mind the time, because the moon will strike the town in 3 days. And at the same time, the festival will start. And so the player must keep track of the 3 days passing. And if he gets too close to the end and isn't ready to finish the game yet, then he uses his special Ocarina of Time that he acquired in the previous game in order to reset time to the first day.
All right. So, John, we got the basic plot. Now, I mean, we have our 4 concepts, our 4 themes that we go down. Why don't we start with the first one? What are some of our likes and dislikes about Majora's Mask?
I partially grew up with this game. If I remember correctly, when I played the previous game, The Legend of Zelda, The Ocarina of Time, I think it was the first time I encountered a game that was trying to tackle a deeper story and have a deeper atmosphere than other games that I had played before. Between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask sticks with me more. There's something special about the themes and the atmosphere of the game. Whenever I think back on these games, I tend to remember Majora's Mask more fondly, as it seems deeper, though I'm not sure that it is per se. Maybe in the future, Nathan, you and I will have to cover Ocarina of Time, because that one is considered one of the greatest video games ever made.
And that's the precursor, right?
Yes, it's the one that came just before it.
Yeah.
So playing through it again, that there is something enjoyable about it. The characters, the fact that there is this town that has a schedule, that everyone has a place where they are in these 3 days that the game takes place in. And that your actions actually affect what happens during those 3 days. So, for example, there's an old lady who's trying to deliver some goods to her shop, and she gets robbed at midnight on the first day. And if you rescue her, then she'll have her goods in stock for the remainder of the 3 days. And if you don't rescue her, then she doesn't have those goods in stock, but also the thief then gets more emboldened to do other things. And so your actions actually having some role in a time schedule, I think, was fascinating for its time. It was not something I had encountered before. At the end of the day, it is a Zelda game, so all of the familiar elements you'll see in this one too. In some cases, they are a bit lacking. Not all of the boss fights are amazing. The level design can be frustrating sometimes. But to me, what makes the game stand out from many of the other Zelda games is the characterization of the various people, races, characters that you meet throughout the land.
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, I still even have, I mean, it's been what, 4 weeks where we've been recording, snippets of the whole gameplay.
6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, okay. Well, that actually gives you a lot of information of how quickly it felt like it went by. It was very enjoyable. Although I wasn't playing them, I actually have fond memories of the boss fights, some of them. Now, obviously, there's, like John, I think you said, some of them are hit and miss. Sometimes the dungeons weren't like incredible to go through. They're a little monotonous sometimes, but I actually really liked some of the levels there. Just being a viewer, if it's able to attract my attention, retain my attention, then I see that as a positive. For me, some of the positives, what I liked about it, John came to me and said, hey, I think this would be a great video game to start. Shpielberg, number one, because he's very familiar with it, which you can see through the gameplay. I mean, you knew the levels, and so it was a little easier than just going into a game blind. You mentioned that the plot, the narrative itself was very interesting, and that it might be something that would work well with Shpielberg. After playing it, I realized I do think that this is a very Spielberg-oriented plot. The main one that I will focus on, I think, through this episode will be primarily the Skull Kids plotline. I found that really interesting, the dynamic that this is a children's game, but also that this deals with relationships, possession in a sense, where the individual who was once a friend, right? Skull Kid was once a friend of Link, right? There's this twisting of this mask, which is very parabolic. I think not only in the cultural Eastern context, but also our understanding of isolation from friend groups because of evil, that this translates and I think is inherent within the narrative of the game. And so I really resonated and liked the concepts that the Skull Kids plot thread stressed heavily. And I thought it was fun that was a big plot thread. It wasn't just like a small concept. This was integral to the game. And so I really enjoyed the plot. Looking back through the game, it was really captivating and it kept my attention through it. So negatives.
The game was made 25 years ago, so there's been a lot that has changed in game design since. Surprisingly, I think it holds up very well, but there's some little quality of life things that are kind of a pain to do. The fact that you do have to reset time, as much as I like the mechanic, and as much as I think that it adds life to the world by seeing everyone's schedules and seeing the world change over those 3 days. When you reset time, you also reset time. You reset everyone's schedules, you reset all of the changes that you've made. So there are times when you'll have to go refight a boss once or twice in order to cause the world around it to change, and so that you can progress the game in other ways. That kind of gets in the way of gameplay a little bit. I know a lot of people did not like this game because of how cryptic a lot of things were. Finding some of the masks can be difficult. Personally, I like that. I like games that are a bit harder to work through, either narratively or from a puzzle perspective. If a puzzle can be married with the gameplay and the narrative all together, you've done it. You've arrived. You've made a good game. And this game does some of that well. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely enjoyable.
It's funny because throughout our gameplay, I kept talking about how much I don't like puzzles in games. I'm just not a puzzle person. Thankfully, John, you're the main one who was doing all of it, so I didn't really have to engage much with it. Dislikes, I think, surrounding the Skull Kid. I mean, what was that grandmother who gave us that story? Remember her name?
Not sure she has a name. She's the grandmother of the innkeeper.
That character goes through these two stories, and it pretty much sums up the entirety of the game. Now, I was able to get the gist of the narrative. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's just because I was a viewer and because it's a game, so it takes longer than a movie, obviously. Those milestones, if that makes sense, the milestones in a plot, I usually expect them to be frequent and consistent, but not be too obvious, like Hallmarky. Have you ever seen one of those Hallmark mysteries where it's like, and Bill wasn't at the funeral on Tuesday, was he? And then 12 minutes later, Bill wasn't at the funeral Tuesday. I wonder if Bill's the that was definitely not the case of Majora's. But I think it was a little too spaced out, or maybe a little too puzzled, at least for a viewer. That was my one complaint, that maybe the plot points, structures that alerted me to the plot was a little too disparate and far between.
Yeah, I can see that. It's definitely different if you play the game. For one thing, you won't take as long as we did. It's very hard to play a game and
have Nathan talk constantly. Yeah.
And play the guitar, which was amazing. Yeah, I find that this game actually works better if you play through the game and then think back over the plot later.
Yes.
Which, that's not a great storytelling experience, but I do think it works better that way.
Totally.
Personally.
That actually explains exactly what I've been feeling. During the game, it was like, okay, sure. But now I'm able to structure my thoughts and how the narrative, that I think that's very well put. It's a contemplative narrative structure, that it happens afterwards, that the pieces start to come together.
Which is funny when you consider that this is a kid's game. So with that, Nathan, why don't you go into a bit? You said that you had liked the main story thread. Why don't you go into that first?
Okay.
And then I'll talk about the secondary story threads.
Okay.
Because I think between the two, we can kind of get to the root of what the game developers were trying to say.
All right. No, I like this. Okay, so I will try to do justice with this. Please correct me if I'm getting any details wrong. But this is the main idea. John talked a little bit about it through what the story arc is in the beginning of this episode. So the Skull Kid story thread is about, he shows up in this town. He's very sad. He's lonely. Tail and Tattle, these two fairy people, befriend the Skull Kid. A little foggy what happens afterwards. I'm pretty sure the guy who has the masks gives a mask, or somehow the Skull Kid inherits the Majora's mask, which is
he steals it.
He steals it. Okay, he's an evil villain, then we shall discard him.
He's an imp, so he goes around being mischievous. That's sort of his initial role. As much as he befriends Link, and they have interactions in the previous game, even then, he is a bit mischievous, and he isn't always the most trustworthy character.
And with that, now that there's a little bit more clarity shining on how the mask originates in his possession, or gets into his possession, the mask almost possesses, or rather, he does possess the Skull Kid, where he wears this mask, and the mask then threatens the town. And we get this sequence where the moon descends, as John said, and it threatens the town. During this, we have this rescue from Link, and Tattle is a companion with Link, and the two of them are, unbeknownst to them, rescuing this Skull Kid who has been possessed by Majora's Mask. And through this, we eventually get the mask away, and the evil eventually gets kind of cast out, or I don't know exactly the right phrase, but the two, Skull Kid and the mask, are displaced, and the Skull Kid goes free, and he's forgiven. Actually, he's reconciled with the people who he's done harm to. He gets to enjoy friendship again. The author's intent, I think, is pretty clear. Friendship is a huge theme within the story. We have Tattle and Link, who begrudgingly are working together for this common goal of saving the town, but they eventually and inevitably save something that they weren't expecting to save, which was the Skull Kid. And they rejoin with him at the end of the story. And that's that's, I think, the center plot that drives the story forward: a reconciliation between friends, a restoration away from evil to non-possession of evil. This mask itself has its own kind of will, which is sad. He feels lonely or something like that. I remember there was that whole cutscene, John. You're gonna have to remind me of that. But this weird cutscene where the mask itself is personified in this dream state up in the moon, and it's really just sad, and that's why it's trying to destroy everything. But the main thing, the main reconciliation, is the Skull Kid, and that's, I think, the through plot. What is the secondary plots that fit in between the lines of this main thread?
While Link is trying to rescue the 4 guardians of the 4 surrounding lands, the guardians that are needed to help stop the Skull Kid from carrying out the plan to destroy the town, in each of these places you go to, the swamps, the ocean, the mountains, and the canyon, he ends up getting a new mask that allows him to transform into a different physical form. So a lot of the masks don't actually transform him. He just puts on the mask and maybe he gets a character trait. Like, you put on the mask of a missing person and you can talk to people in town about the missing person. Or you put on the mask of a stone and everyone just ignores your existence like you're just a stone. There are a couple masks in particular that transform you into other creatures. Some of the other creatures that you meet in the game. The race of fish people, the race of sort of mountain rock people.
Gorons, bro.
And a small race of sort of plant-like people. Each of the stories that deals with the either acquiring the mask or the stories surrounding each of these different areas, I think is really fascinating. Because when you go to the canyon is essentially the burial ground of the kingdom. As Link explores it, he ends up finding that a lot of the dead are not capable of resting. There's a lot of spirits in the area. There's a mysterious group of assassins that protects the land. And around a small research house, there's a whole bunch of mummies that you can see. And it turns out, while exploring all of this, you find that the researcher himself has sort of become possessed by a mask that he made to resemble the mummies. And early on in the game, or right towards the beginning, when you learn about everything that's been going on with the town and with this evil Majora's Mask, you hear about it from this mask owner. And this man owns the Happy Mask Shop. This mask shop is actually in the previous game. One of the slogans that goes along with it is that he wants to bring happiness to the whole world through masks. And so in this game, you learn that a lot of the masks in these various places are either controlling people or are sort of the representation of unresolved issues in their lives or pent up emotions, anger, or sorrow. This Happy Mask salesman who you meet ends up teaching you a song. It's called the Song of Healing. And so Link will go to each of these areas and often will play the Song of Healing for some people in trouble, such as the researcher who was possessed by this mask, or a dying fish person who laments that he cannot perform with his band anymore as he's dying. You encounter the rock people of the mountains, the Gorons. You encounter the spirit of one of their mighty warriors who has already passed away. And he knows that there is unfinished business he must attend to. And so he can't leave until that business is attended to. And so you take the song of healing to each of these places. By playing the song for these different characters, they're able to let go of these things that are either holding on to them or that they are holding on to. And I love these scenes because when the song is played, they show a little cutscene of sort of the representation of them letting go. Mm-hmm. And when they're done letting go, you see them either return to their normal state or move on, in the case of those who are already dead. And you actually get to hear the masks drop to the ground with a clunk. And I love that because there's just this genuine sense of you are impacting these characters' lives in ways far beyond your own understanding. And not only that, but because you're going to each of these lands and fighting the creatures, the bosses of the dungeons, when you defeat them, you end up sealing their power within a mask. And when their power is sealed and the guardians of the land, the gods, if you will, when they are freed, the land bursts back into life. In the mountains, it was encased in ice and frost. By defeating the boss and freeing the guardian, the land now has some greenery returned to it. The harshness of the winter is gone, and the winter that is there now is much more peaceful and calming. In the swamp, a lot of the swampland is poisonous, but when you actually rescue the guardian, everything returns to its calm, natural state. And so I love this idea of the subplot sort of dealing with sealing up or banishing evil and restoring life to the area.
That brings up a really good language, I think, that the authors are conveying. There's a personification, I think is the way you kind of put it, that these masks are personifying the very issues that these places are experiencing. I think pretty much in every case, right? Evil is found. Once it's banished, there's an altering of either the physical place, as you stated, but also the mask, which is the personification of the situation. And that's found ultimately in the main narrative thread, which is the Skull Kid. But throughout this kind of cascading waves, ultimately that come to the shore, which is the main resolution at the end, with the Skull Kid abandoning his mask. So what is the philosophical perspective behind all of this that the authors are kind of conveying? What is this idea that these masks have this form of evil? Maybe this is an Eastern thought itself that you can maybe speak to a little bit, but what is the philosophical grounding that the authors are trying to convey?
Well, it's sort of this return to the way things should be, right?
Okay.
A return to nature being at peace. A return to people not having issues, to forgiving each other, and restoring the state of life into a place of peace and calm.
Yeah.
We can wrap that up in just the Jewish word shalom.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean peace in general, but it means a restoration to the way things are supposed to be.
A complete peace, right. That's, it's interesting. These are narrative tools, but they're also linked to culture. No pun intended. Link is our hero. He's the one who is initiating these things. I mean, when I think about authors and their perspectives and they're also their audience that they're, in this case, facilitating this game towards, what are we supposed to take away from the character of Link, do you think, with that idea of shalom, that peace, that completion, back to the way things are?
Well, this being a video game, I mean, Link is supposed to represent you, the player. He is what has been termed a silent protagonist. He never actually says anything, and he rarely ever even emotes. And so very much he's supposed to be a sort of representation of you, the player, giving you, the player, an opportunity to step into this role as the hero.
Video games are wild that they kind of invite the player into the role of, most of the time, the main character, the hero. And Link is no different from a hero. He doesn't even seem to have much weakness, other than, the plot seems to bog him down and he has to go through the different routes. But this idea that Link is capable of affecting change is definitely inherent within the writers and the developers of this game. I think it's a pretty beautiful motif when I think about it. And I don't think I often do think of Eastern cultures, especially since this is a Japanese video game. I don't know if I attribute that level of, I don't know, mundane heroship, to just everyday thought within the Japanese perspective. Now, I am highly ignorant of that. I don't necessarily know much about Japanese culture, but I think it's really beautiful that Link is the player, in a sense, and the player has the ability to restore how things should be in the world. And so, yeah, I would totally agree that seems to be definitely a big theme within the author's intent.
I think just about every culture has stories of great mythical creatures, great beasts, evil gods coming in and messing up the way things should be.
Right.
It removes people from living lives of peace. It removes peace from nature. It brings death to the land, or disease or famine of some kind. Mm-hmm. And the expectation is that there is some resolution, that this truly is a problem that needs solving. Right. That it's not just a new normal, that the return to a time of peace, a time of prosperity, is something that is looked forward to by all people. And that has to be brought about by some hero, some savior of some kind, to rescue people from where they're at.
It's actually really interesting when I think about it, particularly in Taoism, the concept of yin and yang. I actually see that a little bit in Skull Kid. He is kind of meant to be mischievous, right? As you've said. Now that causes problems. Hello, Moon, right? Would you agree?
I mean, in a sense, as I understand it, the thing with yin and yang is that all things possess some good and some evil, some light and some darkness, which means that the status quo will never be a time of complete peace. That there will always be things getting in the way and messing things up.
And so that's what I was going to say. I think the author's intent, maybe not intent, well, this is where it gets a little interesting. It almost feels Taoistic. It feels very yin-yang in some of the characters' actions, motives, perspectives, where, like you said, it's almost just, it's inherent within everything. And so evil doesn't have necessarily a definitive, how could I say this, characteristic end, origin, other than it just happens. It just happens, it's a part of it, but there's a tension within the story of a desire to be on that light side of the yang, of the yin and yang, but also that tension between that evil just seems to replicate, and that seems very active in the storyteller's mind. I think that's where we kind of butt up against not a Western perspective, but a biblical perspective of how evil and good interacts with each other. And so that's what I see a little bit about author's intent. They are about the moral grounding of the story, which is good and evil not really feeling, how did you put it, complete? Able to be complete?
I always find it interesting that these kind of stories very, very, very clearly show that evil is not wanted, good is wanted. But there is the idea, at least in the philosophy of the East, that everything contains some good and some evil. So I can't say if Eastern thought agrees that it's a good thing, that there is good and evil in everything. Honestly, I can totally understand how people came to this conclusion. You go throughout your daily life and everywhere, every day, there's some good and there's some evil. You'll find plants that are thriving, find plants that are dying. You'll find people's lives that are going well and people's lives that are not going well. But what's interesting is in the midst of all of this, as human beings with rational thought, we have the ability to act into these situations. That when we find things that are dying, we can help them live again. Or we can choose that if we find things that are living, we can destroy them. I think that most people, at least on the surface, would say they want things to live, even though the way that we act, all of us, tends to be putting things to death.
It's interesting because the word that comes up a lot of times in this philosophical conversation of the yin and yang concept is harmony. The word harmony, balance, is kind of essential to the topic. There is that sense of harmony is very key to the understanding of light, darkness, good, evil, in that it's inherent within the system, the philosophy of Eastern tradition, where I think the story butts up against, as you pointed out, Link has a responsibility to act. Some of the characters have responsibility, but I don't know necessarily if there's a true resolution to the question of whether ultimately, or even should, good trump evil. Is there that answer within the story that it should, trump evil? Another question that I have, which I wonder if we'll be able to get into, is does this story allow the concept of oppression, suffering, evil as something almost necessary that the characters have to go through? I see that a little bit with the story of Goron in Death, where this great leader dies, and the resolution there is he doesn't come back from the dead. His legacy continues on, though. Eventually the restoration of his country. And so I'm wondering, there's a lot, that's a scattered question, but do you want to speak a little bit to maybe a couple of those points?
Well, I think all of the points can be summed up by just looking at the story.
That's probably wise.
You have a problem, and the problem needs a solution. And in this case, the problem is that the moon is going to crash into the town and kill everything and everyone.
It's a big problem.
Everywhere.
Yep.
And in order to combat that, they need to rescue the guardians that are being held captive. And these guardians are considered to protect the land from evil. That is their purpose. That is their role. And so there is this idea that good is supposed to triumph over evil, because when good doesn't triumph over evil, or at the very least, when good doesn't keep evil in check, then evil spreads, evil consumes and devours, and life is taken from the land. Not added, not redistributed, but taken. Can we say that from the way the story is presented that there should only be good? I'm not so sure about that. The imp is mischievous at his core. Yeah. That's part of his character. There is still a thief in town who does not get put to justice by the end of the game. There's a small pawn shop that will actually sell illegal goods towards the end of each day. And none of these things are really wrapped up. Additionally, each of the lands still has the monsters in it. Even after you restore balance, after you restore the guardians to their rightful role, there are still enemies there. You can still fight wolves in the swamps. You can encounter bats at night in the mountains. And so while I do think there is this idea that good is necessary to triumph over evil, I don't think that there's this expectation that evil is fully ever eradicated.
Right. That's so interesting. I think that's what's really interesting about the Eastern religions is there's not really a firm answer, but there's a recognition of these concepts. And I think that's alluring because there's a blurring. There's a blurring of both good and evil, but this understanding that no, good is good, for lack of better words there. Ambiguity kind of reigns. And that's really enticing, I think, for our answers, especially Western individuals who are coming to Eastern religions and saying, look, we were told that good will triumph over evil, and evil is just bad. It must be eradicated, but I'm not seeing that right now. The Eastern religions really help by saying, well, we don't know, but we still got that problem. The Eastern religions themselves say, hey, we don't know, but we kind of know, and we want good to reign, but we don't have a firm answer. And I think that's a beautiful segue, if we could, to how can we take away certain facets of this story as believers? How can we interact with them?
The thing that I always take away from this is kind of what I already mentioned in the subplots. It's those moments where Link encounters a problem, and the only solution to that problem is for him to play a song. And he plays the Song of Healing, and we get these cutscenes of the character experiencing peace, release, freedom, these fundamental things that I think all of us desire in some way in our lives. And these characters are given those. And when they are now free from the situation that they were in before. And the song that plays there is quite moving to me. Maybe it's just because of the context, that the composition itself isn't that deep. But there is something deep about the concept of providing healing. Jesus says that he has come to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the captives free, and to declare the year of the Lord's favor. And what that last one there means, every 49th year, there was supposed to be declared a year of Jubilee, where all debts across all of Israel were forgiven. And so here Jesus comes along and says that he has come to bind up people's broken hearts, to set captives free, and to basically clear all debts. And that is kind of the gist of what I think of when I remember Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
The game is all about, oh, I have to go into this area now to rescue this guardian. And the area is full of death. It's full of darkness. And as the protagonist, as Link, you, the player, are supposed to go in there and to bring healing to people, to bring light into the dark land, to restore the death that has come over this land and to bring life back into it. That honestly is what I always think of, and that's why I like this game so much, because in the midst of the darkness that's there is a sense of hope. There is as we've said, there is a eucatastrophe, but in this case, it's one that is caused by, not by Providence itself, but rather by you, the main character. You get that opportunity to bring it into the lives of these people in these lands.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. In fact, as you kind of pointed toward, the lands themselves get rejuvenated. They turn, almost like a season passing. They turn into something from winter into spring. In that case of Goron, which is, I think, one of the most stark examples in Majora's Mask. But it reminded me, you brought up Jubilee, and what's awesome is that during the Jubilee, you were not to harvest or sow or reap anything.
The land was to be given rest.
Right.
And that means from the farmer as well.
My image is when someone does not reap and you give that land rest. Throughout, when God says that he will give the land rest, later on it happens where the Israelites go into exile. Like the land has to be given rest through Israel just being removed, which is kind of crazy when you think about that. This flourishing of the land, so that as things before the Jubilee was systematically kept, and well kempt, the land was now just let to grow. And now it's almost like a year of spring, which I think is a really cool imagery when I think about how you were bringing that in, and also Goron's imagery of winter to spring. Further, just one thing I wanted to add, the masks, the whole it's Majora's Mask. That's the big thing about this. I'm going to read something completely out of context. And I just want to get your reaction, because, John, I know you'll immediately know where this is from. And immediately there fell from his eyes something like scales, and he regained his sight. And he got up and was... And I can't go the rest because then it'll destroy the context and you'll figure it out what it is. But you know where that's from. He gets baptized, right? It's Paul. It's Shaul in Acts 9. And it's this cool concept. I don't think I got it up until you said it like that, where their turmoil, their suffering fell from their faces. That the thing that was causing them such pain, that was personified through a mask. Many of the masks are made in vivid detail, resembling the thing that they most suffer from or inflicted from in this pain. The scriptures give us also a physical representation, in the case of Shaul, of Paul, that something falls from his face, falls from his eyes so he can see properly. Not only his sight physically, but his sight spiritually, as he was told the word of Jesus, that he is now someone, which is also cool, a connection. The scales fall from his eyes after he is told that he will be an instrument of the Lord, so that he will now do good, proclaim the kingdom. He has a mission in of itself. So this concept, I think, is really cool, this parallel where we get imagery in Majora's Mask, but also in Scripture. There's a precedence where something afflicts us, personified in the face, which is a really important part of our body. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I'm talking from my face. I like the idea of the face, like a mask or scales from the eyes, that this is a consistent theme, bridging the gap of Eastern tradition to biblical imagery of the true redemption, the true jubilee, which is the year of the Lord's favor, that Yeshua, Jesus, has come, and he is the jubilee now, as it says in the early chapters of the gospel. Just really cool ideas, concepts, imagery.
Well, yeah, and you can push that a little bit further too, in the fact that
Dare we?
before Paul could start his journey actually serving the Lord as he was supposed to, the scales had to fall from his eyes. And funnily enough, as much as Link brings life and frees other people, he himself has to be freed at the beginning of the game from his own issues. The Skull Kid ends up cursing him towards the beginning and being turned into one of the plant people, a Deku scrub. Link, which I will remind you was the hero in the previous game, is now being reduced to something. He had a place to be prideful in the same way that Paul was prideful of his own religion and his own religiosity before the Lord. He himself has to be healed by someone else through this song of healing before he can then take the song to others.
That's so good. I really wanted to bring this up just so I don't forget it. And, we were talking about the concepts of evil, definitive good. What are these ends? It's funny because when we get to the character of Link who needs healing, whose blame is it? Right? The Skull Kid, but is it really the Skull Kid? I don't know if there's necessarily resolution in that story, but what's amazing is the Bible offers us an explanation of where evil comes from in our human experience. And it's pretty bleak. I'm reading in James, I just went over it yesterday, but this passage, which I think we're all familiar with, but each one is tempted when he's carried away and enticed by his own lust. When lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin is accomplished. It brings forth death. And so death is a theme throughout Scripture and also this story, the death of this town, obviously, the death of individual characters that is threatened through the masks and the Skull Kid and the et cetera. What's poignant about Scripture and what's kind of cutting about Scripture is it says the onus, the blame is on the individual. So it says evil is really bad. It is really bad. We need good to triumph over evil. But the origin of evil is the self. And that's really cutting. And I think that's unique about the biblical perspective in contrast to this story. What will you have to say about origin of sin, origin of evil? How does the story interact with that? And well, first of all, maybe how the story interacts with it, but also what is the biblical redemption from our own corruption that seems to be like the mask, right? That needs in the story in Mark, the man who is possessed, he needs to be bound, but he keeps ripping open his bonds and he can't stop himself. What is the answer for that?
Well, I don't think that you will find an answer to the origin of sin in this game. Just because, as I understand it, in Eastern philosophy, and specifically Japanese, I don't believe that there is a concept of sin. And if there is, it is definitely not the same way that we view it at all as Christians. So I don't think that you'll find that in this story. But what you can find, though, in how it can be taken care of, I really think that the fact that even our hero, before he can go to the other lands and to rescue them, he first must be rescued himself. And that is with a song that heals. That is not something that really exists in primary creation, in the world as we know it now. Music does have healing tendencies, but that's just because it puts the body and the mind into a good mood. But in this case, the song itself is almost magical, something that is in secondary creation.
Lord of the Rings has Aragorn, the kingly figure, I'm pretty sure have healing in his touching. There's in the book, this is like a massive theme, which I think surrounds, and that's also C.S. Lewis. He brings in song as a healing thing. So that's a very interesting parallel.
But I think that this song, it's something supernatural. That this is not just a normal, oh yeah, we wrote a song and it heals people, but but rather this song must be introduced to the player as something truly supernatural and miraculous. And only then can the hero's quest really take place, after he himself is set free. And so in the same way, in our own lives, we cannot be set free from our own sin unless something supernatural is granted to us, that we are rescued externally to ourselves, that we are not capable of solving our own issue with sin. It must come from something externally. And who, pray tell, or rather where does that rescue come from, Nathan?
You know, it's so interesting because there's the concept that you're bringing out, which is Link needs to go through his own transformation. And I think that's consistent with just general moral principle. And Jesus talks about this, take the log out of your own eye, and so then you can take the speck out of your brother's eye, right? But that's why I think the biblical message is so cool when we compare it with this one. And I mean, it's not like poo-poo the story. The story is beautiful. It gives us a facet of truth, but doesn't give us our whole truth.
Right.
And the whole truth is amazing because it talks about substitution. So Jesus is perfect. He's the most perfect because he is perfection itself. He's God. That's a really important thing to understand, that goodness is the original. Evil is a contortion of that which is good. That's why they don't share a whole. They're not two sides of a whole. That's really important to understand within a biblical understanding of morality. That evil is actually just a perversion of that which is good, which means, great news, good is the only true thing. Everything else is a lie, and lie is what really actually makes up evil. I'm being a little repetitive here, but the gist of it is Jesus, being perfect, became a substitute for us. So instead of needing to be perfected, although it says that he learned obedience as a substitute for us who are disobedient. So we're almost in like a perpetual deco state. Where we're completely corrupted, and what we need is goodness. And so in this kind of typological way, Jesus dies. He takes on the form of evil, the greatest form of evil, which is death. And since he's completely good, he can defeat evil. He can defeat death. The contortion of life is death. The manipulation, the perversion of life is death. And since God is the original good, he is life. He is the ultimate living. He is living. And he's the one who can reverse the power of death, reverse the contortion, the manipulation, the deception that death comes from. And so by his substitutionary atonement, we can receive his blood, which in Leviticus is considered life. Blood is life in biblical framework. And by receiving his blood, which is life, we gain life. In James, it was talking about lust gives birth to sin, sin gives birth to death. If we apply life over death, we get resurrection. And that first happened with the firstborn of the resurrection, which is Jesus. And we inherit that resurrection through the blood, the life that Jesus gives and imparts through his death, burial, and resurrection, his gospel. That was a long-winded way to go about that. Please tether that more to the story. I'd love to hear your navigation of biblical concepts in regards to redemption.
Well, I think that's pretty good. In this particular story, though, because it is Japanese, there's only, I guess you'd call it one-sided substitution. So in the case of us and Christ, Christ gives us his life, his good, his positive, and he takes on our evil, our negative. In the case of Japanese culture, there's something called a katashiro. Nowadays, it's used as a sort of a white piece of paper that's cut out to look kind of like a person. In the past, it was small, like stick figures that were made. And what these katashiro do is if you have an illness or if you have disease or some kind of negativity about you, you would rub the part of your body that has been infected on this katashiro. And then the katashiro itself would be disposed of, usually by being tossed into the river or being tossed into the sea. And it takes on your uncleanliness, your disease, your illness. I think that masks used to serve a similar role in Japanese culture. I could be wrong there. But they definitely serve that role in this game, where all of the sorrow or the anger or the negative aspects of the situation end up being contained within these masks. Unfortunately, the game then does not have the opposite end of the substitute. The game almost assumes that there already is good in everything, and that good does not need to be given. Good already exists. It's just that evil needs to be taken away.
Which is kind of like the idea of corruption, which is the concept we're talking about. That good is the original, and then evil must be taken away. What I find is the paper that you described, they're ritual and therefore efficacious in that religion. Ritual often has that kind of connotation. What's interesting is it very much acts like secondary creation. So it is like a substitute, but it's a piece of paper. And the power comes through the ritual promise. Right? It's a promise. It's saying, if you do this, you get this. What's amazing is that we have, yet again, we have something that has entered primary creation. The paper has become flesh and blood. We're filming this on December 23rd. So it's right near the remembrance of the incarnation of Christ, which makes it, I think, even more present in our minds. But the idea that this paper, that concept, has incarnated in primary truth in history, that we do have a substitute that's not just based in ritual, that's not just based in promise, which every religion has, but that it has become flesh and blood, therefore being incredibly relational. That's why we call him the second Adam. There was an Adam, the first man. He's long been dead. But this second Adam has come back, and he's still alive today, making everyone who is under him alive. And that's what's really amazing is that, we're going to come back to this concept again and again and again, but that the secondary creation has entered into our own. But that's just the beautiful brilliance of Tolkien. And it's true. So, John, why don't you close us out with how we can apply some of the principles, the truths, maybe some of the differences we find between the narrative of Majora's Mask and the biblical understanding of sin or redemption and good and evil. How can we apply that and go out from today with those principles in mind?
Definitely for those of us who are Christians, who believe that Jesus did die in our place, that we can be in the same role that Link is. The Song of Healing has been played for us, and our issues have been taken away. Now we are to go to others and to do the same, to play them the Song of Healing, to introduce them to this Christ, who is the fulfillment of everything that we've been waiting for, and to introduce them to his power, his love, and that he may bind up their broken hearts, that he may set them free and declare the year of Jubilee over them.
That's so good. Well, thank you, viewers, so much for listening to this podcast. If you want to support us, where can they do that, John?
On Coffee. Links will be provided in the description.
What?
And just a reminder, you can check out the entire playthrough of Nathan and I going through Majora's Mask over on Coffee if you become a member. And we'll give you a little taste of what that looks like right now.
All right, ready?
I don't think so, but okay.
Okay. Link, a bit of a stink. Oh yeah, we're getting the fiddle in there. who has no thing in his brain to think. Why, little green boy, are you sold as toys? Alas, I'm only 35 and you're a forest fairy? The established government is capitalistic. Sinfulness. I'm just a girl! We should all be socialists and befriend that Princess Zelda chick. What is happening in Protestant churches? 70 years ago, our forefathers brought on this continent a new nation conceived in... that's a library. In liberty.
Conceived in the library.
Conceived in... That's a different kind of library. All right.
The Library of Congress?
Library of Consummation. The
Emancipation Consummation.
Welcome. Well, birth of a nation, right? I mean, boom. Haha, gotcha. Protestantism. What? Right as I say that, this frickin' lady comes in full frame, totally destroying
Protestantism. Never before have those words been uttered.
the moon pimp, bro.
You know, I never actually asked you this very important question. Does this look like a gnome?
You know, you guys are really stupid.
Also, games are fun.
All right, brothers and sisters. Go out from here, play a game you like, maybe watch a movie you really enjoy, a TV series. Do something that reminds you that we are supposed to go out in our daily lives bearing the message of the King, bearing the song, the melody that Jesus has proclaimed. And we can do that with the encouragements set out not only in this episode, but maybe in something else that you enjoy throughout the day, throughout the week, that encourage you to impact those around you to carry that message. So God bless, and we'll see you next time.